Hey there, welcome to Assorted Goods. My name is Dan Felton. Thank you for joining me here. And unfortunately, this is it. This is the last episode of Assorted Goods. I know it's a little bit abrupt. I know I didn't really announce a major send-off or anything like that, but the truth is, I've thought about bringing Assorted Goods to an end for a long time, and right about now, it's felt like it's run its course for me, truthfully. I mean, I had a whole lot of other ideas I thought about going into, but when it came down to it, I just felt like it was time to move on. So this is it. This is the last episode. This is one last little thing to publish onto the feed to say goodbye. And of course, to say thank you. Really, I can't thank all of you who have listened to this show enough for the support over these last 3.5 years. Wow, I can't believe it's been that long. This has been one of the more inconsistent podcasts in the podcasting world, but sticking with it over these 3.5 years has been really meaningful, and I hope that it has been valuable to you, the listener, for as long as it's been on the air. Really, I've learned a lot, and more importantly, to sound a little corny and cliche, I'm sure, but I found a level of self-confidence that I don't believe I ever had before, and I think this podcast and the response it's received and the people I've met over these years have played big roles in that. It's been much more meaningful than just a creative endeavor. I, of course, have to give a big thank you to everyone who has stopped by to be a guest on Assorted Goods over the years. My friend Carlo Trenadu, journalist and writer Matt Hongles-Hetling, Dr. Joseph Ferrari, and Dr. Nicole Tetro, lawyer Bruce Siegel, Michael Motley of the One Mike History podcast, John Williams and Ben Robinson of the Geek Exploration podcast. And look, I'm really thankful to have had the chance to meet the people I've met through this podcast and to have meaningful conversations both on the air and off the air as well with them, to share ideas and share their ideas with you as well. It's really been one of the most important pieces of doing this podcast for all these years. And look, as I sign off from Assorted Goods here this episode, I've actually brought one last friend around to shoot the shit a little bit and look back on my first podcasting baby. A friend who has become a bit of a podcasting confidant, Jeff Feightner, who hosts the podcast Round and Round, For the Trees, and Half Fast. He's also helped produce multiple projects like the audio dramas Dispatches of Disassociation and Coyote's Bluff, and he plays Cameron on this audio sitcom Four's a Crowd. He's a really busy guy, and yet I managed to bring him in for one last go around here on Assorted Goods. So Jeff is here to help me roll the barbecue cover over Assorted Goods, and look, I'm not going to have some big outro after Jeff and I's talk here this episode, so I'm just going to get everything out of the way up front for you. First of all, I still exist in the podcast world. Every week, my best friend Matt and I talk and crack jokes at various stories we find from the news, internet, and pop culture, and our own lives as well. That podcast is called Fucking A. Fuckin, no G, EH, A, like Canadian, A, like me. So you can find that podcast on all the podcast players that are out there. And if you want it in visual format, you can see my beautiful face and Matt's also beautiful face on YouTube as well. So search it there if that sounds like something you're into. And if you want to stay in touch with me, you can hit me up on the social medias. Most of you already do, I know, but if you stumbled upon this show once upon a time and want to get in touch, find me on Twitter and Instagram at the handle @disinformeddan. Or you could even just email me, say hi, share some thoughts on Assorted Goods or whatever else is happening with you at dan@disinformed.ca. And last but not least, to bring Assorted Goods to an end is to free up the space, the time, and the mental energy to move on to new things. I do have a new podcast that I am planning on launching in the coming months, still in some early stages, but of course I will be working on that and will announce the show when it's about time to do so. So I'm not really going anywhere. I'm just continuing to work on myself and growing as a creator, getting better at all this stuff, trying new things, you know, the spice of life, all that philosophical crap. So again, look, thank you to each and every person who has listened to this show, who has shared it, who has made it a part of your listening routine. Thank you all for the kind words of support over these years. And thank you for helping me grow as a person and a creator. Really, it's been so amazingly meaningful to me. When I first started the show, I had never done anything creative really in my entire life. You know, imagine that, about 27 years old, starting to write for the first time or produce audio. A really awkward kid who suddenly picked up a microphone and started talking into it like strangers wanted to hear what I had to say. And it turned out there were a few strangers who did. And I'm really glad that you found that valuable. And I hope that in the future, whatever I create will be meaningful and valuable to you as well. So until then, I hope to hear from you all soon. And I wish all of you the best as well in your own lives. And for one last roundup, here it is. My last chat with friend and fellow podcasting creator, Jeff Feightner. Enjoy. Much love to you all. And I'll talk to you all soon.
Oh, I suppose we should introduce the thing. Like, hi, this is Jeff.
No, yeah, I was going to say the awkward introduction of this will come after my brief public service announcement intro. But we are gathered here today
to mourn the loss,
to mark the pod fade of Assorted Goods once and for all, abruptly and sort of out of the blue and not announced. But I thought a good way to eulogize the show was to bring Jeff, who was supposed to be a guest at some point, but we never quite figured it out.
That's right.
Jeff, who has become my podcasting confidant and partner in totally legitimate business. Jeff, say hi. Welcome to the show. Welcome.
Hi, thanks. I'm so happy to be on Assorted Goods finally after all these years.
Just in time. Just sliding in under the garage door as it closed.
That's right. That's right. Just picture me in a cheesy knockoff Indiana Jones hat with a plastic pleather jacket and a child's bullwhip replica.
Well, we won't have video of the episode, but that's actually what you're wearing. So
it is indeed what I'm wearing. And I have two little orange capped plastic pistols. Yeah. Just because.
I got a question to start though, Jeff. Does this qualify as a pod fade?
I don't think it's pod fade. I think pod fade is like what I do.
Okay.
Where I've started titles and actually produced a couple of them and then just don't finish them because I get into other things.
Right.
Assorted Goods, you've done what, 5,000 episods, I think, or at least 5,000 hours.
Count. I lost count
deleted some.
because I deleted a bunch of them and then restarted it. I think if I'm not mistaken, I finished at about 70 or so total.
I mean, what I think I would call this instead of pod fade is, all good things come to an end, right?
Yeah.
And it is
in there somewhere, I'm sure, but
it is important to acknowledge when something's run its course, and it's okay to let it end and look back on it fondly, but not regretfully, not with remorse.
Sure. That's a very nice way of putting it, I think.
So, there's never been an original thought from my brain. I read an article somewhere about why do we always say, the failed marriage, the failed friendship, the failed this, the failed that. It is okay for things to end over time.
The idea that if it doesn't last forever, it's not a success.
Correct. It could be, it was a successful period. And I think Assorted Goods, if the only thing you got out of it was, if I recall some things you've mentioned over the years was,
sure,
you're a socially awkward person who has issues with being in public and talking to people and interacting with people both online and in the real world. And now here you are, something like 3 years later, and you are a much more confident person. You're able to express your opinions and beliefs in a way that is cogent and meaningful with researched and data-backed ideas. You also know how to produce the content. You have grown by leaps and bounds from your very first episode. Just in production, not in content-wise. I'm not commenting on content because you've always defined your content and you've always met that definition.
Yeah.
And now as you're getting into your 30s, you realize you want to do something and define it a little more clearly. And I think that's important. I think you are hitting the benchmarks of everything that a podcaster or a content creator should.
Now, this is why I knew I brought you here for a reason. It's not the ego boost that is there. There is something funny about that I don't obviously speak about this, but I will here, obviously. But starting therapy in the last month or so for not terrible downer reasons, for more like exactly what you said. Like I'm in my 30s and I'm like, I got to work. I got to figure out some of the self-identity stuff I'm doing here and find somebody to talk to. Right. And I'm fortunate to have access to good services and some benefits through my job and all that. And I wish everybody on earth had that opportunity. But I had a moment a few weeks ago when I was talking to my therapist going, I get back out into the world now and I don't feel the same anxieties that I used to feel interacting with people. And I said to her, I was like, I feel like I'm losing my fucking mind. And she was like, no. Like, have you considered that in fact you've changed and grown as a person and just haven't really recognized it? And maybe the COVID and being kind of isolated has kind of a circumstance where you haven't been able to test yourself really because of that. And it's more jarring after a couple of years to step back into the world and be like, hey, like things are different. I just didn't notice. Right. So yeah, I think the podcast has something to do with that, Jeff. I think the friends, the real success were the friends along the
way. Okay. but no, I mean, that idea of, as you were experiencing that growth and it happening concurrently with COVID locking down and kind of, COVID was a forced state that you wanted naturally, right? Like,
yes,
the social anxiety thing.
When
like
it started, I was like, this is my wheelhouse. This is exactly what I'm looking for.
And then it kind of became this forced state where you're like removed from any kind of public interaction. And you did experience growth because we as podcasters, generally us specifically, we spent a lot of time on the line interacting with people and trying to build those that network, so to speak, those channels of communication and collaboration. And then I can totally see it, how you step back into the real world. And then all of a sudden it's like, this isn't so hard anymore. This doesn't hurt so bad. This isn't so challenging. And I experiencing that as a jarring, like punch to the gut, like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Like this is a weird, it's like instead of losing, it's like if you lost 50 pounds, but instead of doing it every day, you just woke up one day and were like, Jesus, like, I mean, great, but also like, whoa, like I didn't even see that happen. So yeah, there's something about that. I mean, you call it networking. I call it vying for validation on the internet. Desperate to have people, so it's not a pod fade because it's deliberate, right?
Right. It's not a pod fade because consider the longevity. You've massaged the idea. I really think you've taken it to its logical end because there's only so many ways to approach the idea of assorted goods as it was originally described in your very first episode.
Yeah.
And that format, while there was value there, I think it lost something that could only be, I think what you were going for was a multi-personality concept. Like it needed more people to be viable because you needed those transitions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you could never do it by yourself.
Yeah.
And as you massaged the format and tried to build the larger stories, I think what you realized was you're kind of lying to yourself about the nature of what the content you were building. Like you really want to be, you really aren't that person who wants to be serious and NPR style. You much more want to make fun of the peoples.
Yeah, so, that's probably the angle. I mean, Jeff, for listeners, Jeff knows better than anybody how many times I almost quit doing this show.
That's right.
And this is about the fourth or fifth time that I've been like, I'm getting out, man. I'm getting out.
I think, so I have to tell you this story. I think it's legitimately the fourth time where I'm done. Like that's the first words that I get in my DMs. I'm done. Assorted Goods is done. I want to get out. And I've supported the decision every time, not because I'm a hateful bastard, but because I'm considerate of my friends and I will support almost any decision in any direction, but also legitimately, I think that there is value in the next idea. There's always a value in the next idea. The difference this time is you actually had the idea.
Yeah, I mean, I had flirtations before. I had a few things, but they were never
formed.
Clear. There were never clear ideas, and they were usually something that was like, it's just the same show, but like with a different name. Show.
there's no value there. Right. But this time you've got the idea, you've got the shape of it, and you have the bones and most importantly, you have the skill to do it.
Well, there's a couple things, right? There's first is as I'm going through this process and talking with people, and the more I start to realize that I'm like, almost nobody does this. The only people who seem to do this whole, like they do one thing and then they move on to the next are like professionals. Like everybody we know in sort of the small, the independent creator community that we interact with, everybody I know is either doing the same show that they were doing when I met them, or they started a show after I, and they're still doing it. Like there's almost nobody who does it with that sort of fluidity, I guess, right? That there are a few people that I interact with who are, have a few different creative projects, and they put an end to one and moved on to the other and done that. But it's very rare. And I remember putting something on Twitter and having a discussion with people about that, being like, do people feel beholden to carry on whatever show they're creating for forever? Like I've heard that being kind of the fallacy of like content creators, right? Like YouTubers who like start something when they're a teenager, and they get really popular and they keep doing it. And then it's like, they're still doing the same shtick, the same act when they're like 30, right. And it's like, you're doing the same thing, but if there's like, I know it's different when you're like making money, because then there's this sort of like feedback loop of like, you got to maintain the fan base that you have, which is, thank God I never had that problem with this show, because
stop,
but it's a thing that I can imagine that for a lot of people, there's probably the nostalgia feeling and the sort of like, comfort in it. And like everyone's attached to their own little babies. Right. So, right. I mean, am I weird to think that this is, or is this a natural sort of evolution of moving on?
I really think it's a natural evolution. You and I, Dan, we bounce so many ideas. If it's a clever title,
it's like the best thing I've ever heard. If it's a clever title,
plus an idea, sometimes they're fully formed, right? Like
don't forget a potentially clever artwork idea, right?
That's right. There
really
has
gets
been,
it going.
There has been some, the first thing that starts the discussion is just artwork. Like, man, this would be a great cover for a podcast. What are you going to talk about? No idea, but I want to use this art.
It's fucking really art's cool. Going to be amazing.
Right. Best cover art ever.
Yeah.
What's your show about?
Yeah. Well, we'll work on that. We'll taper the back burner that one. Yeah.
But no, man, I think because I actually didn't catch most of that conversation on the Twitter, it was a bad couple weeks for me.
Hey, you didn't miss much. It's Twitter.
Well, I know, but also I feel like some folks probably weren't being honest with themselves. Like if there are people out there, if they're not considering a next idea or growth or an evolution of their own product, then I think they're fibbing to themselves. I think everybody has the idea, like, is what I'm doing still valued? Is what I'm doing still relevant? Especially if you're not making money. If you're making money, then you have a direct feedback, a commentary on what you're doing. Right. Well,
there's also, there's a discussion to get into there about goal, right? Which is that some of the people I talk to, they're just doing this because they love what they do, right? They don't care if 5 people listen or 1 person listens or a million people listen, that they'll just keep doing the show because they love what they do and all that. So there's a division in, I think, the outset. And I guess that's what I was wondering about this, is that like, is my desire to like make another or like to move on to more projects and all that kind of its own answer for me of being like, what am I doing this for? Right. Like I always was just like, oh, I'm just in it for the love of the game. But after like 3 or so years of doing one show and being like, it's kind of stagnant and the ideas kind of run its course and all that stuff, I could just keep doing it for the love of the game. But maybe I'm admitting to myself, like, no, I do actually want to make successful things or make bigger things or something like that. Is there an avenue there to explore? I guess like,
I think it's valid. I mean, I think so. There's so many layers to this, right? Like there's self-satisfaction, right?
Sure.
If if you're actually not content with what you're doing, then do the thing that makes you happy. Right. And I think that's where because when you get frustrated with your own work, why am I doing this to myself? And that sentence has been asked multiple times.
Yeah, multiple times.
Right. Why am I doing this to myself this way? And I think that feeling is why I was all for like, just let it go. Write it off. Find the right idea to be next and then let it the fuck go. So much so that our mutual friend Billy said something about I'm trying to convince him to hang on to Assorted Goods. I was like, no,
and he did a little bit at a previous iteration of this, right? Which was sort of the funny part of that.
You cannot do that, sir. I have worked too hard to make it okay.
Well, the scary word is the B word, right? Brand. It's the brand. I'm like, what?
Okay.
I thought about that a few times and I'm like, what brand?
Right.
The brand? Like selling t-shirts and shit? Like, no, I'm not at all. And that's sort of the inevitable conclusion. It's like, I know I said it to you a few times. It's like, I've thought of quitting the show like 4 times. Mm-hmm. And so therefore that's pretty much the good enough reason to quit this show. Was that like, if I keep coming back to it again and again, every 6 months being like, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. It's like, all right, that's all you need.
I think the last time, somewhere last fall or so. Yeah.
Yeah. It took a few months off.
I think I said to you, if it comes up again, bro, you gotta be done.
Yeah.
I feel like that was words that fell out of my face.
Well, there was also an earnest approach. Like people listen to the show know, and for the few who have been here since the start, you're in that category. Like it's changed in its format and its focus like 10 times in 70 something episodes. Like it constantly changed. And then in the fall, when I was ready to drop it again, I thought I should give it an earnest, really, really invest in doing it the way I want to do it and all that. And I did. And then 6 months later, I was like, I'm kind of getting there again. Like, I was like, I'm going to plan to wrap this up. And I was like, I put down like the final like 10 episodes I was going to do. Yep. Right. And then as the weeks went on and I started to do a few of them and I did a few other ones and I started to explore ideas that I'd written down. I got to this point where I just started like removing one and I was like, that's not going to work. And then I removed another one. I'm like, that's not going to work. And then I don't even want to do that one. And then next thing I know, I had like 2 things left. And like one of the things I was going to do kind of like fell apart a bit. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to quit it right now. It's just like, maybe I'll do one more. No, it's done. It's done. I'm quitting immediately.
I think, it sounds so weird to say, but for the weird thing that I'm trying to get out of my mouth is that I'm actually proud of you for carrying it through this time and reaching an end and being able to say, turn it off. But it was so funny because when we talked last time and I was like, plan your exit, right? Like, you want to, and this was back, it must've been early March or something, or
a couple months, I think so.
Because we were planning, it was 16 weeks because there were 8 episode ideas you had.
I was going to do every other week. Yeah.
It was going to be bi-weekly. And I was like, okay, well, you could plan it for, because it was going to end on Canada Day. Right. That was the way I mapped it out. Cause I was like, you got to plan it now, write it down. And then that will help you get to where you're going. Right.
Yeah. And
we had that conversation and it felt like a really good conversation. And I felt like, a successful, we got to a point where it made sense to you. I felt like I had done some good in the world. Right. And then immediately I started talking to like a couple different potential clients. And I was like, if you want to try something, you have to plan it, write it the fuck down. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I talked with, Country Boy, which I recorded as an episode of For the Trees and have yet to be able to edit it yet.
For listeners, that is Michael Motley, who was a guest on Assorted Goods a few episodes ago from One Mike History, aka Country Boy.
I was talking with him and he was talking about growth and getting to the next stage and all this stuff and doing things.
Yeah.
And I was like, I told him kind of the same thing. I'm like, bro, write it down. Make a plan, write it down.
Yeah.
write it down with, as corny as it sounds. You've heard of SMART goals.
Yeah.
I can't get away from that concept. It specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely, right?
Mike is a great example, I think, insight wise into somebody that I interviewed. We're talking about him when he's not here because he's done that to me before, so it's fair. But the thing I love about it, what he's done in the last couple of years is, the way he's incorporated. Look, Assorted Goods. I'm having my ADHD brain here, where I'm having multiple thoughts at once, right? So, Assorted Goods was always completely contrarian. I never followed the industry rules, right? All the things that the experts and the thought leaders in the field would tell you to do and advise you to do. I did none of them, and then I sort of became a contrarian to them over the course of time, being like, I'm making a point of avoiding the how-to books and all that stuff. And then after a few years of it, I started to be like, you know what? There is validity to expert advice. And what I love about Mike and what he's done is that he has incorporated all the things that you should do, right? And, but done them in a way that are uniquely his own and unique to his content and to his show and to his brand and all that. I think exiting Assorted Goods and moving to something new is also a realization of not to be such an arrogant dick about it and be like, you know what, there is validity to these things and to properly strategize any sort of creation. And you don't have to, I don't want to say those terms necessarily. You don't have to be a sellout. You don't have to like do all the corniest pieces of quote unquote industry standard, but like you do have to bend a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Again, depending on what your goal is, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Well, then, as somebody, I think your perspective is great because you're also somebody who's bounced around projects aplenty.
Indeed.
For many a year as well. And I guess, from your perspective of it, what is it, like I said, not a lot of people do this thing where they jump from one thing to the next. So what's the allure of the new project?
Well, so Round and Around was started, right? We like me and a good friend at the time. I really wanted to make a podcast. He and I could speak for hours about everything.
Right.
And some of the shit just left me in tears, right? So that's what I wanted. I wanted those kind of conversations. And we went through a long creative process to really determine like the thing we were going for. There was a lot more, because I read a bunch of like how to make a podcast and what makes podcasts successful and the do's and don'ts and all those things, right? Content wise, not like the technical side, because I do technical for a living. So I wasn't worried about that so much as like, how do you like, what content do we want? And, we did a lot of things where it was a lot better than we wanted to present. Like I wanted it presented as like a amateur.
Yeah.
Like just a bullshit indie little amateur podcast. Right. But I wanted it like I did it as professionally as I could. Right. And that makes no damn sense, but use the best gear I could afford, the best software, edit it really well, right? Put a lot of work into the sound and make it sound really good, but then do dumb shit, right? Like,
yeah, high quality, more sort of, I don't know, I guess sort of rough shot, like natural sounding stuff, but like done with quality.
Yeah.
Done with love and care, really.
Right. It was, there was a lot of intentional, like it was scripted, even though we made it sound like it wasn't. There's a lot of effort put behind this thing. And every time, like you were the first guest, and the first time I sent an outline, I was like, here's the outline. And you said like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I remember being like, is this what people do? Like, is this
right? And you were like every single podcaster guest would be the same. Like, I've never written an outline in my life.
Yeah.
And the intent was, though, the whole time it's going to sound like a dumbass conversation, and we're going to build like, we're just going to like feed each other and respond and, just get dumb. Right. But there's effort put in behind it. And it was a very good thing. And then we broke up, and then I didn't want to do the show anymore alone. Right.
Yeah.
So I had to find my way and define what the next thing was going to be. Because as I've always said to anybody who will listen, podcasting is an extremely unique opportunity to exercise creativity in so many different media.
Sure.
I get to speak, right? I should have been some type of performer. I believe that. I hate that my childhood went the way that it did. And no, I'm not blaming my mother. Nor I'm not blaming my absent father or my asshole stepdad. I'm just saying I wish I had been raised in an environment that would have fostered creativity and performance and given me that ability to at least try, rather than be a frightened fucking asshole about it for so long. Anyway, that's enough of my self fucking therapy.
I'm about to start billing you.
You can leave all of that shit in. I don't care.
Sure.
But what podcasting gives, like, I get to do this, right? I get, I've found voice acting as a thing, right?
Yeah.
There's a creativity that I find in editing. Like, I make jokes out of the edits that I make for Billy in his improv thing, right?
Right.
And that's something that it was requested for one of my new potential clients. Like, there's an art to editing. And the guy said, essentially, yes, I'm hoping that you're able to make the same kind of humorous cuts, because I found them and that shit is funny to me.
Right.
And I was like, wow, like you actually identified the joke that I made in my editing. Like, that was the coolest shit I've ever experienced. But
your abilities are being recognized in that way.
So there's that, right? But then we get to do the graphic art piece, right? Like, we make cover art, merchandise. Yeah. And my buddy George was saying the other day, because I'm working on the new promotional / like licensing logo kind of brand stuff for the production company. And I showed it to him, and I was talking, he was like, I need to get some new shirts, because he has like one of every For the Trees Are Round and Round shirt.
Right.
And I'm like, well, just hold off, because I'm almost done with the FP stuff. And he's like, or we were talking about screen printing rather. Because I've done some, like, I've operated a professional like screen printing thing for a while. Yeah. I know how to do the process. And we use screen printing at work to make new faceplates for equipment and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, I was talking about how to do that and how to make new screens and all this stuff. And he's like, you're the only person I know who actually has a merchandise line or a brand line. And I'm like, okay, that sounds really weird when you say it that way, but it's true. Technically, I do have an entire, merch line for what
he's the only person that he knows in his direct life. Because in the podcast community, everybody's selling t-shirts.
Right.
Everyone's selling them.
But I mean, he actually has a friend who has a mildly successful YouTube channel who's never considered merchandise. And I'm like, that's stupid. That guy should have t-shirts. That guy should absolutely have t-shirts that he wears every fucking day. But anyway, so podcasting gives us all of that ability, right? Like, I get to draw.
Gives you an excuse to make your own t-shirts and give them to friends.
It gives me an excuse to design a new logo or whatever and go get beanies made. It gives me an excuse to draw, to exercise all these things that I've always done, but with an outlet, with a purpose, right?
Sure.
So I have to do it. I can't not do it, or at least interact as a guest or produce something. I have to be in this space. It is a thing to me now. It is beyond a hobby, right? Because it's hobbies are the empty holes where we throw money for fun when you have disposable income, right?
Right. It's filling the voids of life, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I have to do it. So to answer your question, how do you transition from one to the next and what do you do? I left around and around, and I wanted to just talk to good people who make good stuff, because that was the summer of 2020. News was fucking wrecked. It was a really bad time. And I was like, I want to, because I had done it a couple times with Round and Round. I spoke with, I've had you on the show, had Billy on the show. You were kind enough to talk with Matt Hongold-Hetling, right?
Yeah.
And then pass him my way. And he's one of the fun people. Like I could talk to him weekly, bro. Like, good people.
We got to get him on a show,
But right. I want to get him on the show again sometime. But, and then he when I had him on the show, it had dawned on me, like, I want to ask the guest for the next guest. Like, let me know who's next. Right.
Yeah.
And then, he introduced me to Michael G. Siemens, the photographer. And that was really cool. And it worked for a minute. And that's how, For the Trees was just, I want to find good people who make good stuff, who deserve the recognition, and more people doing, like, paying attention to them. Right.
Yeah.
The hook was always, plug your shit now, promote yourself now. And hopefully we can convince people to leave this thing and go listen to you, or go look at you, go buy your stuff, go look at your art, and that's that. I think there's a value there, but my opinion, I'm not a person whose opinion matters enough to anybody to make that mean something.
Right.
That same show done by somebody who already has a name would be fucking
has a
money.
booker and has a crew and people who just do all the work for them, and then they just get to sit down and be like, "Hey, tell me your story." That would be great. Right.
Because it is essentially an Oprah style show, right? Like, come on and tell us about your book. Come on and tell us about your new movie. Come on and tell, but I also got to talk with Billy, and then Billy has his improv group. And one of those improv artists is a voice actor professional, right? Like, she won an international award for voice acting for a toy, right? Like, millions of people have bought this toy, and every single time they push their button, they hear Tony's voice. And Tony's like, "Hey, somebody in my Pilates class is like a writer for Marvel or something. Would you like to talk to him? I think he'd be great." And I'm like, "What?"
Like, hell yeah, I would.
Of course.
And that's the networking thing, right? I mean,
right. And there was it was there's, I got to, and we chatted for like a hot, I can talk. I don't know if you know this.
I hadn't. No,
but yes, it's true. I can talk for hours, especially when things fascinate me. Right.
Yeah.
And Dalen Musson, that's his name. He was a writer on The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And like, it was so weird because, like, he could not do the interview without having a Disney representative on the line the entire time.
Just in case you spoil the series that people are clamoring
because of Mark Ruffalo. Like, now anybody anywhere anybody who has anything to do with it, who talks in public, has to have a fucking handler.
I am going to forever blame Mark Ruffalo for everything. That I feel like it.
That's right. You need to grab that little piece of audio where I said because of Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah, it's because of Mark Ruffalo. I'm quitting. Assorted Goods is ending. You know why? Because of Mark Ruffalo. Thanks, asshole. But I mean, I've loved being a guest in this sort of circular point in itself here. But yeah, it's I joke that the the real success was the friends along the way, but I think the real success was exactly that, the exposure to things that you've never done before. Right. That when I first did this, I'd never done anything creative in my entire life. It was on a whim. There was a sequence of events that led me to podcasting in the beginning that had they not fallen that way, I maybe never have done it. Like, being like the most awkward, socially disconnected person to be like, I want to put a microphone in front of my face and talk. It's like, why? What are you thinking? Like, how did you get there? And it just so happened that way. And the accessibility of the industry and this sort of avenue of content and all that stuff has a big role to play in it as well. It is really easy. It's very easy to do. It's not very easy to do well, but I think I love the fact that exactly that you meet people if you're open to it, if you're open to connecting with other people on a level that is beyond just having people sort of like applaud you,
right.
A lot of people make content just for that, just for the audience. You know what I mean? They just want, that's why there's a lot of the professional advice is quite literally, be controversial, talk about hot button topics, say outrageous things, be, straight a line and all that, because it builds engagement. It builds an audience by being noteworthy, right? They advise that, you need to stand out in a world where there's so many people vying for your attention. You need to be noteworthy and you need to say and do things. But I don't think I ever would have stuck with any of this if it wasn't for the people that I met, the friends, literally the friends that I've made, you and other people in our groups and people who I've guested on their shows and all that. And every time I guest on a show and we talk about podcasting, it's always the same thing. I always come back to the fact that I love the fact that I know how to use like Adobe's Premiere Pro now. Like I know how to like stitch a video together and layer things. And like, I just recently learned how for the other podcast that I live on with every week, fucking A, please listen to that. Me and my buddy Matt every week, funny stories, conversations, et cetera, promo, self-promo. But I just learned how to make YouTube versions of it. It was one of those daunting things that like, I used to just put like the pre-made audio onto YouTube.
Oh shit.
And then I started to figure out like, I bet I can find a way to actually make YouTube videos for it. And it's one of those things that's like, I did it once and now it takes me maybe an hour a week to convert it into a YouTube video that has graphics and backgrounds and all, intro cards and transitions and all that stuff. And it's like, when would I have ever learned this shit? Granted, it's not exactly a lucrative endeavor yet. I am still very much in the hole financially in this whole process. But like I said to you before, paying for Zoom now after they broke my balls into making me do this by changing the policies.
The great opponent of Zoom, the naysayer, the guy who complained and said, I shall never use Zoom again.
Took me 6 days to fold.
Has just run his credit card, friends.
Yep.
He's on the hook for $20 Canadian every
the same day
month.
We're recording this interview together, this eulogy for Assorted Goods. An episode of fucking A came out in which Matt and I basically raved and ranted about how much Zoom sucks and uttered all sorts of heinous insults their direction. I also signed up to pay them a monthly fee. And as I told him to justify it, I said, it's to spend money on something that is related to a hobby that I love, that enables me to do something fun with a good friend and every week, like, that's, I talk to people who are always about like, well, if you put money in, you need to make sure you're getting it back, sell merch, this and that. I'm like, you know what? It's the process of it, right? Mm-hmm. Like I'm going to pay for Zoom because it gives me all the shit I need to make YouTube videos for a podcast. It's easier to use than other things. I feel like it doesn't feel like lost money to me to pay for the Adobe programs, for example. It's not cheap. It's not a cheap monthly bill.
It is not. What
I mean? But it also, like, I ordered 2 things on Uber Eats and it's more than that. It's more than what Adobe cost me per month if I decide to shell out for a pizza or a burger or something that delivered to my house. Like, there are mindsets about this, I think, as well, like creatively and in terms of sunk costs and like money in, like, you got to spend money to make money, they say. I really also think you got to spend money to explore avenues of yourself. There's an element to this podcasting game that to me, it's like, I don't know if I'll podcast forever. I don't, I'd like to, but also I don't know if I will. I don't know. Maybe one day I'll be a video editor, or I'll just be a writer, or I'll just do voice acting. I have no fucking idea. But I never would have had the opportunity to explore all these different creative avenues if I didn't start with this. It's the doors that have opened up along the way, really, and the people who have been behind them, I guess.
And as far as money goes, right? Everybody, if everybody doesn't already have some type of hobby or outlet for themselves, they should. But if everybody has a hobby, right, it is more often than not an expense. Of course. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, even if it's a free thing, like to go do, like, you can go hiking for free, but how do you get there?
Yeah, it costs you gas, your boots. You need some boots. You need to buy some shit to take on the trail.
There's a baseline of equipment. There's the commute to get to the place, right?
Yeah.
That's an expense. Just, consider there's money is like, in the podcasting game, you can spend as much or as little as you want, right? Like you can record for free. You can post for free. You can publish for free. You can edit for free. You can do all that. Sure.
Yeah.
There's definitely a limit, like quality wise and effect wise, where, at some point you kind of have to make the leap either for UI purposes or for
tools or programs
analytics
or
tools.
Yeah.
There's a point where you leave the free host. There's a point where you leave the free editing software and you go on and do something more.
Buy a better microphone because you're like, geez, these other people sound great. Like,
right. Why don't I sound? How is it that there's a limit to how good I can sound? Right.
Yeah.
And eventually you get there. But I will never regret the expense of this hobby because of all of the things, right? Like that's the return on investment. It's like, if you put in $200 to get gear to get started, and you go into this thinking, well, if I don't get a return on this $200 within 5 months, I quit. You're doing this the wrong way.
Jeff, any parting wisdom for a show that didn't succeed?
But it did. But that's just it. It did. It succeeded in being what it was. And what it was your first podcast. It succeeded in giving you the experiences that you've had over the past, not 3, but 4 years, Dan.
Yeah.
When was your first episode?
October 14th, 2018.
October, really?
Yeah.
Okay.
She was a fall launch.
It was fall of 2018. It was a
brisk fall day that we set to sail into the podcast world.
Things were good back then.
They were, marginally. But
they weren't really that good. Anyway, no, man, it's always been, and we've said this from like our very first interactions. You have to define success, right?
Right.
If you define success initially as making a good product that you are proud of, then you were successful until you weren't. When you decided that you weren't as happy with the content that you were making, and now you're ready for change, right? It's your decision.
Yes.
It's not your listener's decision. It's not your mom's decision. It's not your girlfriend's decision. It's not your brother's. It's Dan's. Dan decided that he wants to do more.
Mom, better. Brother, girlfriend, etc. Sorry to all of you. Especially listeners, because I know how shocked they were to be like, what? You're quitting? You didn't even announce it. And I was like, yeah, I'm done. Sorry. I guess I'm out. I didn't really say, we started this with is it a pod fade? It can't be because it was really way too abrupt to be considered something that faded. So.
That's right. That's right. Not a fade at all. It was a hard cut, smash cut.
That's right.
The only way you could have done it any better is to have already produced the first episode of the next thing and roll straight into it.
Vastly overestimating my ability to get things done, Jeff. I appreciate the sentiment. I appreciate you hanging out here for the last episode as the coffin slowly lowers this podcast into the ground. Although it lives on in spirit and also in a newsletter that listeners can subscribe to that is probably closer to like the real essence of Assorted Goods, I think, than maybe even the podcast ever was.
I think so.
Yeah.
And also it lives on the host and will always be listenable unless you do something dumb.
That's true. As long as I can still pay for it. Otherwise, you're going to have to email me and I'll just like drop you the MP3 and you can just take it that way. We can do this old school, folks, if you really want to. I'm open to it. But Jeff, nevertheless, thank you. But I'd be remiss not to let you plug anything you want to plug. Now you're on the spot.
Okay. So I make a lot of stuff. I think first off, I want everybody to go and listen to Forza Crowd because we're about to record the final 4 episodes of that show. For what it's worth, We're doing that. We're recording it on Sunday. It'll be released over blah, 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 blah. And that'll be it. That'll be done. 2 seasons and never again. And it's worth listening to. I thought it was a lot of fun.
And I was also on it.
That's right.
Multiple episodes as a guest star.
That's right. And I'm
really the main point of the whole show, actually. So.
I don't think that's true. We also, you and I, we collaborated on a thing called Coyote's Bluff, which is a audio drama kind of police comedy thing that was a hell of a lot of fun to make. It was the first thing that we really made. That's not true. That's not true at all. The first thing we made was Dispatches of Disassociation.
Yes, it is.
And that was a fucking roller coaster, and it was a blast to do, which led to the creation of Coyote's Bluff, which then in turn led to my taking the step towards actually doing this quasi professionally for other people. And you can go listen to the product of a lawyer who is an improv actor, getting down and witty on laying down the law. And if you actually want to listen to shit that I make myself with my own voice, it's called For the Trees. It's called Round and Round. There are some extant episodes of Half Fast out there, a car and technology podcast, which I let die when the COVID hit and I couldn't go to car shows and touch them anymore. It's
a recap of numerous pod fades to cap off this pod fade.
Half Fast was a pod fade, but right. Due to circumstance rather than whatever. Anyway, yeah, those are all the things that I'm involved with making.
And I will make sure to, for one last time, to put a little show notes together with links to all of those, just to refine my show note making skills.
Dan, I love you. I love you.
Love
like
you
a
too,
brother.
buddy. Thank you for dropping by. Thank you for hanging in there.
This was just episode 1, and it was rocky at times and a raw production at best. A lot of lessons were learned, and there's so much more to improve on, and I'm looking forward to it. But, suggestions are welcome. Any wise words of wisdom from anybody out there? I love me some engagement. So, drop me a line.